All right, so we're asked to determine the amplitude, period, and phase shift of y equal to 1/2 cosine of 4x plus pi, then graph one period of the function. All right, so step one, we recognize that the function is of the form y equal to a cosine of bx minus c. So where a in this case is equal to 1/2, b is equal to 4, and c is equal to negative pi. It's going to be opposite of the sign you see there. So we had a plus pi, so it's going to be opposite in that case, so negative pi. All right, so that helps us find the amplitude, the period, and phase shift. So we know the amplitude is just the absolute value of a. So in this case, the absolute value of 1/2, which is 1/2. The period is going to equal 2 pi over b. So it's going to be 2 pi over 4, which gives us pi over 2. And then the phase shift is c over b, which equals negative pi over 4. So negative pi over 4 is the phase shift. All right, step 2, find the x values of the 5 special points. Which, okay, so we have to take our period and divide by 4. This is the value that we will increment from the first x value. Okay, we'll use to increment it. So what's our period? We found the period to be pi over 2. So divide that by 4, which gives us pi over 8. Okay, so then x1 is equal to negative pi over 4. Since our phase shift is negative pi over 4, we'll start at the phase shift there, negative pi over 4. All right, so then now we take our second value to be negative pi over 4 plus our increment of pi over 8. All right, so let's go ahead and combine these. So that's what, got to find a common denominator. So 2 pi over 8 is the same thing as negative pi over 4 plus pi over 8. And so that would give us negative pi over 8. All right, so x3 is negative pi over 8 plus pi over 8, which would give us 0. All right, so x4 is 0 plus pi over 8, which is equal to pi over 8. And then x5 will give us pi over 8 plus pi over 8, which is this 2 pi over 8, or pi over 4. Okay, so that's our x values. So then we need to find the y values that correspond to these x values. So find the y values of the 5 special points. All right, so let's create a table to do so. All right, so our first x value, right, our first x value was negative pi over 4. All right, so then we're going to evaluate our function, 1/2 cosine of 4x plus pi at these values. So we have 1/2 cosine of 4 times negative pi over 4 plus pi. So that gives us 1/2 cosine of negative pi plus pi, which gives us 1/2 of cosine of 0. So cosine of 0 is 1, so we get 1/2. Our next x value is negative pi over 8. So we have 1/2 cosine of 4 times negative pi over 8 plus pi. So we have 1/2 cosine of negative 4 pi over 8 plus pi, which is equivalent to 8 pi over 8. So that gives us 1/2 cosine of 4 pi over 8, which is basically pi over 2. So that's 1/2 times 0, which gives us 0. All right, and then next value would be 0. So we have 1/2 cosine of 4 times 0 plus our pi. So we have 1/2 cosine of pi. So we have 1/2 times cosine of pi. Cosine of pi is -1, so we have -1/2. Our next x value would be pi over 8. So 1/2 cosine of 4 times pi over 8 plus pi. So this is 1/2 cosine of 4 pi over 8 plus pi, which is 8 pi over 8 pi. So this way we have a common denominator, so that's 12 pi. 12 pi over 8, but 12 pi over 8 is the same thing as 3 pi over 2. And so we know cosine 0 at 3 pi over 2, so we have 1/2 times 0, which gives us 0. And our next x value would be x equal to pi over 4, so we have 1/2 cosine of 4 times pi over 4 plus pi, so that gives us 1/2 cosine of pi plus pi. In other words, 1/2 of cosine of 2 pi. So that's 1/2 times 1, which gives us 1/2. Okay, so we have a negative pi over 4 comma 1/2 as our first special point. The next one would be negative pi over 8 comma 0, then 0 comma -1/2, and then pi over 8 0, and then finally pi over 4 1/2. All right, step 4 here. Plot the points and connect with a smooth curve that resembles the cosine function. Okay, so to do that, we will basically partition this in multiples of pi. So starting with the positive side, we would have pi over 8, then 2 pi over 8, which is the same thing as pi over 4, and then doing the same thing. And this would be, of course, if we keep on going up more, you add another pi over 8, you get 3 pi over 8, and so forth. Now going on the negative side, we would have negative pi over 8, negative 2 pi over 8, which is the same thing as negative pi over 4, and then negative 3 pi over 8, if we extend it further there. And then we're going to go up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. Okay. All right. So then let's go ahead and graph. So we have our point at negative pi over 4 1/2. So we're starting there, and then negative pi over 8 0, and then 0 -1/2, and then pi over 8 0, and then pi over 4 1/2. And then connect the dots with a nice smooth cosine curve. And so we get something like that. All right, that's it for this video.